Today it seems impossible to live without a shower. Smell means dirt. Dirt means disease. But in the Middle Ages, people could go weeks without washing and sincerely consider themselves clean. Why? For modern people, the Middle Ages are an era of stench, disease, and filth. It seems as if people simply didn't know what hygiene was. But that is a mistake. Medieval people were not stupid. They simply understood cleanliness in a completely different way. First, water was not considered an unconditional good. Cold water, especially in winter, was seen as dangerous. It was believed that water opened the pores of the body, allowing illness to enter. The more often a person washed, the more vulnerable they became. So frequent washing was perceived not as health care, but as a risk. Second, cleanliness in the Middle Ages was primarily spiritual, not physical. Purifying the soul was far more important, through prayer, repentance, and fasting. A dirty body was not a problem if the soul remained pure. Many saints deliberately refused to wash. This was seen as an act of humility and rejection of earthly pleasures. A clean body was often associated with luxury and even sin. But this does not mean that people did not care for themselves at all. They simply did it differently. Clothes were washed more often than bodies. Linen and wool absorbed sweat and dirt, protecting the skin. Changing a shirt was considered more important than bathing. Herbs, oils, and perfumes were widely used. Bodies were rubbed with aromatic mixtures to mask odors. Smells were not eliminated. They were covered. In addition, people became accustomed to smells. What seems unbearable to us today was part of everyday life for them. The smells of markets, animals, smoke, and people blended into a single background of existence. In this world, cleanliness was measured not by sterility, but by conformity to the norms of the time. Washing existed, baths existed, but they were not a daily habit, and certainly not considered mandatory. A medieval person did not strive to be odorless. He strove to be normal, and this is where the main difference between us and them begins. If a medieval person washed rarely, it was not because of laziness. They feared water, but not because it was dirty. They feared it because it was considered dangerous. In a world without microscopes or knowledge of bacteria, the human body was imagined as a fragile shell, filled with invisible openings, pores. It was believed that diseases entered the body through them, and water, especially cold water, was thought to open these pores. After bathing, people often felt chills, weakness, and exhaustion. Today we understand this as a reaction to cold, but then it was seen as proof. Water weakened the body. Winter and spring washing were considered especially dangerous. During these seasons, bad air, miasma, was believed to fill the world. Wet skin became vulnerable like an open door. For this reason, even medieval physicians often warned against frequent bathing. Medical treatises advised, avoid baths if you wish to preserve your strength. Paradoxically, baths still existed. Public bathhouses were common in the early Middle Ages, especially in cities. People went there not only to wash, but to socialize, receive treatment, and make deals. Over time, however, attitudes changed. Epidemics of plague, smallpox, and the Black Death reinforced fear. People noticed that many fell ill after visiting bathhouses. Today we know this was due to crowding and poor sanitation. But the medieval conclusion was different. Water weakened the body and allowed disease inside. By the 16th century, bathhouses in many parts of Europe began to close. They were viewed as places of immorality and infection. Clean skin was no longer a sign of health. It became a sign of recklessness. Instead of water, other methods of cleansing became common. Bodies were rubbed with dry cloths. Powders, herbs, and aromatic mixtures were used. A dry body was considered a strong body. Even the nobility, who had access to warm water, bathed rarely. French kings might bathe only a few times a year, yet sincerely believed they were hygienic. Most importantly, medieval people saw no contradiction in this. They did not think of themselves as dirty. They thought of themselves as protected. And here we begin to understand. The fear of water was not ignorance, but a rational response to a world full of invisible dangers. If medieval people rarely bathed, feared water, and lived among smoke, animals, and dirt, a natural question arises. Why did humanity survive at all? Why didn't cities completely die out? Why didn't epidemics wipe everyone out? The answer, at first glance, is paradoxical. What we today consider terrible and harmful actually made sense back then, and people adapted to this world in their own way. From a modern perspective, medieval hygiene was strange, but it was not meaningless. People used the resources nature gave them, and their methods were effective for survival in conditions where medical knowledge was minimal and mortality from infections was extremely high. First, their bodies were constantly exposed to microbes and bacteria. Medieval people interacted with soil, animals, smoke from the hearth, and minimally processed food from childhood. Their immune systems developed naturally, forming antibodies that helped fight most infections. Modern humans are protected in sterile environments, but that's why we are vulnerable to many diseases that medieval people faced daily and adapted to. Second, clothing served not only as protection against the cold, but also as a kind of hygiene measure. Linen, wool, and sometimes hemp absorbed sweat, oils, and dirt, while being washed and changed more often than people washed their bodies. Clothing acted as a filter between skin and the outside world, preventing direct accumulation of dirt on the body. Third, smoke, which seems harmful to us today, was actually a protection. Smoke from a hearth penetrated the house, clothing, and hair, repelling insects, slowing bacterial and mold growth, and helping preserve food and wood. Homes were never cleaned by modern standards, but they were safe. Smoke passing through straw and wooden structures acted as a natural disinfectant, creating a microclimate that prevented dangerous microorganisms from spreading. Fourth, the rhythm of medieval life was extremely active compared to today. People walked long distances, carried heavy baskets, worked in the fields, built houses, and cared for animals. Their diet was simple: grains, vegetables, dairy products, and meat, without sugar, preservatives, or chemicals. Many modern diseases simply didn't exist in their environment and diet. This made them less susceptible to chronic diseases that we consider normal today, even though their lives seem harsh and brutal. Another crucial factor was the construction of their homes. Chimneys didn't exist, but the central hearth created a constant flow of smoke inside. Heat from animals kept inside the house amplified this effect. Partially underground houses or sunken floors used the earth's warmth as a natural accumulator. Walls, floors, and roofs worked together as a single system, retaining heat and creating dry air. Social aspects were equally important. Survival depended not only on individual hygiene or housing, community, village cooperation, collective work. This was another level of protection. Building houses together, repairing roofs and walls, helping neighbors with cleaning and cooking created a network of mutual support, increasing the survival chances of families in the village as a whole. The main paradox of medieval life is that people didn't try to eliminate dirt, microbes, or bad smells entirely. They learned to live with them in harmony, turning chaos into an organized system. Smoke disinfected, dirt filtered, animals warmed, the sun and earth preserved heat, and the community maintained order. The modern standards of cleanliness and hygiene often make us more vulnerable. People of the past understood their limitations and used every element of nature, every resource, to survive. Their methods were rational, not primitive. They didn't create sterile conditions. They created an adaptive ecosystem that supported life. So, if we look at medieval hygiene through the eyes of the people back then, we see not filth and barbarism, but a complex survival system where every smoke, every rag, every puddle played a role. They survived not despite the conditions, but because of their deep harmony with them. Their world was dangerous, yet astonishingly adapted to life. Perhaps this understanding that humans are part of nature, not its enemy, makes the history of medieval hygiene instructive for us today. The paradox of survival in dirt, smoke, and cold is one of the most impressive lessons in human history.